everybody. Welcome to What Drives Us One-on-One with special guest Edward Niedermeyer. Now, you may have seen... There we go. I'm sorry. You can say hi.
Hey, how's it going, Russell?
You may have seen Edward on the show a few times, but Edward is here under completely different circumstances. He has just authored an Amazon best-selling book called Ludicrous, The Unvarnished Story of Tesla. Did I even get the title right?
I actually called it The Unvarnished Story of Tesla Motors, and people have asked about that. It's because I really just wanted to make it about the car part of the business. Cars are what I know. Car business is what I know. So I wanted to focus on that and not get sidetracked in the Solar City stuff and a bunch of other stuff.
So you're saying that the 3 pages of solar questions that I had?
Oh. I mean, I'm happy to discuss it. I mean, the challenge with this book was making it like it's a big story with a lot of angles and elements to it, and getting it down into something that is digestible and approachable and not intimidating. Like, there was a lot of stuff that had to be kind of, left out and just focus on what I felt was the most important stuff. And so, yeah.
So, okay, I'll ask, because you said this. How much stuff was left out? I mean, what was the original draft?
Oh, I mean, I probably wrote this book like 3 times. Like, I probably wrote about 2 or 3 times the volume of what's actually in the book. It's funny because, like, I've seen people, obviously there's quite a few people who are very anxious to find things about this book to criticize even before they read it. And one of the things is like, oh, it's so, it's only 220 pages or whatever it is. And it's like, that actually makes it harder. Taking a story like this and condensing it down into that kind of a length is actually much harder than just rambling on forever. And that was one of the real challenges, and especially doing it in a way that I felt was fair, because the more you condense stuff and the more you leave out, the more opportunity there is for bias to creep in, and it inevitably does, no matter who's writing. Everyone has their biases, but I want it to be fair, but again, also approachable and digestible. So it was not some like intimidating, book, doorstop, basically.
Right. You could have written 800 pages. Anyone could, right? The trick, though, I know a few authors, and they've always said short stories are harder to write than novels, and you get paid less. So it's like, okay, but it is harder to be concise, succinct, breaking things down into elements that are still compelling and interesting, yet not filling 3 pages with endless narrative.
Yeah, exactly. And that was, I really didn't want this to be I didn't try to make this the definitive history of Tesla, where it's like, official definitive history. What was important to me was to explain why Tesla has become what it's become. So why it's been so successful in the ways that it's been successful, why it's been so unsuccessful in the ways that it's been unsuccessful, and why people have such polarized views of it. Those were sort of the main things I was trying to illustrate. And so I really tried to boil down the history to what I saw were as being the sort of the factors that contribute to those characteristics.
So people who don't know either one of us watching this, they see like a gray-haired old guy, and they see a young man with boyish good looks, when in fact, Edward, you're not that young. I mean,
no.
And I think a lot of times is that I've heard that criticism of he's a kid, he doesn't know anything. What I want to know is, and you go into this briefly in the book, you sort of fell into cars and car writing, which is very much my story too. I'm not a car guy. I fell into the car thing, and it just kind of dragged me along a really cool path.
Yeah.
So, but I know this from interacting with you. You know an insane amount. Where did you learn all this? Is this just from years of writing, studying? Where did this come from?
Yeah, so I basically started writing about cars fresh out of college in 2008, and I got the job randomly because there weren't a lot of jobs generally around then. And so in 6th, 7th, and 8th grade, I homeschooled, and that really taught me the value of self-education and sort of how to educate yourself. And that's something that I try and do in all areas of my life. but also, I mean, especially, if it's something that I'm doing professionally, I want to get better at it all the time. And what's cool is that actually blogging is a really great way. It's a really great self-educational tool, because you go and you read a bunch of stuff and you sort of figure out how it all fits together, and you write about that. And when you share what you're learning, people learn along with you and they respond well to that. And so that's kind of always been the blueprint for how I approach writing. Is it's not, I try not to set myself up necessarily as like the expert with all the answers. It's, I'm trying to figure this out. I'm trying to understand, here's the story, it's captured my attention. How does this fit in with what else is going on in the world of cars and then also beyond? And I think being a non-car guy, what that allows you to do is to sort of connect cars to all these other parts of our lives, right? Whether it's, business or trade or, labor issues, the environment, or what have you. And so for me, cars have also been a way to explore a whole bunch of topics that I'm interested in. So I don't just get hung up on the car itself. That's like the lens through which to see a lot of other really interesting subjects.
What you said about blogging is super, super pertinent. Again, resonates with my experience. When I was doing Priest Owners Group every day, I'm reacting to stories that I'm writing, and I want to refute them, or I want to, so I have to do the research. So I have to read, I have to educate myself, and then I have to put it into words, regurgitate it in some interesting way. And yeah, I mean, doing that every day for 5-6 years to start with was an incredible education. Yep. So let's talk about your new book, which, by the way, I did read, just for everyone out there, and I loved it. I think you're a great writer, which is something, again, that you don't get credit for. You get credit for hating Tesla, being young. You've made millions of dollars shorting the stock.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
That's a joke.
People want to believe it. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, when you don't have a good reputation for an argument, it's he's a hater. He's a disgruntled ex-employee. He made money shorting the stock. He works for big oil. I mean, like all of these things. And sometimes it could be somebody who just says, you know what, I see this and I don't think it's right.
Yeah. Yeah. I don't like it. And what's funny to me about it is that, some of it is definitely a Tesla specific thing. Like Tesla fans definitely like to do the ad hominem thing more than anyone else, and they're much less tolerant of criticism than even fans of other car companies, or really just fans generally. I mean, they're some of the most extreme fans of anything that I've ever come across. However, before I wrote a lot about Tesla, my main sort of project and sort of how I really learned about the auto industry was covering the decline and fall of the Detroit automakers, which by 2008 was pretty well advanced. But I read a lot about sort of what had happened up to that point, and that was really sort of the main thing. And that was a fascinating subject, and it was a great way to learn like why this business is so hard, and what the pitfalls are of the car business, because they ran into like all of them. But also then I was constantly accused of bias, and you just hate, you just hate GM, or a GM car must have run over your dog, or something like, all this stuff. And I just, it gave me a thick skin, because I just realized, no matter what you say or do, someone's going to not like it. And that person, if they don't have a substantive criticism, they're going to say that you are just biased and that people should just not pay attention to you. And what that sort of taught me is that like I can't do anything about bias, right? Like, yes, I have a bias. Everybody has biases, right?
Mm-hmm. Sure.
The question is, how does that bias manifest itself? And so when people say, you got this fact wrong, I take that very seriously. And I want to figure out, did I get that fact wrong? If I did, I want to correct it, right? So I can control whether or not my work is accurate and truthful. What I can't control is whether people like my perspective or not. And if you just don't like my perspective, if I tailor my perspective to what you like, there's just going to be someone else who doesn't like that perspective. And so the truth is really the only thing that, we can sort of all agree on, right? Or we should be able to all agree on. And when we can't, that's when things get really troubling.
Yeah. Yeah. When we can't agree on the truth, and boy, there's a lot of that going on these days.
Yeah.
Okay. So I have a few pages of notes.
Okay.
That I actually took while I was reading the book because I'm old and I forget things. So the first question I wrote down, it goes like this. Would it be fair to say that Tesla has spent most of its existence trying to devise and prove a new way to build cars, or perhaps as Elon would prefer it, a new way to manufacture altogether? And would it also be fair to say that up till now, it's failed at most every juncture?
Yeah. So, I mean, I think the way I see it is that Tesla's kind of always had an ambivalent attitude towards manufacturing. That's changed a little recently when they have, but I think that trying to revolutionize manufacturing thing, like that's very recent, and that came out of sort of the number of pre-orders that they got for the Model 3. Right, that was the point at which they sort of wanted to accelerate the plan and get to 500,000 by 2018, which still not there yet. And so, but I mean, if you go back to the beginning of and this is one of those factors that I wanted to pull out of the history of this company, is that, from the very beginning, Martin Eberhard and Mark Tarpenning, before Elon Musk was involved, they had clearly read, it's like that saying that, like, it's the little bit of information that gets you, like knowing just enough to get yourself into trouble. If you're totally ignorant about something, like, you're going to get experts and help, and you're not going to make assumptions and stuff. If you know just enough, that's how you get into trouble. And I feel like they read an article or something about how, and this was a trend at the time, that automakers were pushing more work onto their suppliers. And they thought, well, we don't have to even have our own factory. The original Tesla pitch deck said it's now possible to be a fabless car company. And the idea was, we'll just buy all these parts from suppliers. They'll sort of snap together like Legos, and maybe we'll even get someone to contract manufacture it. And we just don't have to worry about that. And like, that very quickly turned out to not be the case. Like with the Roadster, they ended up, and again, I tell this story in the book, they got sucked way deeper into the car business than they thought they would. And that eventually gave rise to their current approach, which is like vertical integration, and we'll just solve manufacturing and come up with like entirely new ways of doing it. But there's still, if you look at how the company is run, they're still prioritizing things like moving fast, which is like terrible for manufacturing. Like manufacturing works best when you plan a bunch in advance. You take all the time you need to plan everything out, and then you operate at as steady a state as possible. That's how you get efficiency and quality. And yet Tesla doesn't do that. They keep rushing. And so they've never, at no point in the history, even though their strategies have changed, they've never just embraced like what is known to work in manufacturing. And they've constantly been trying to find some unique way of not doing what everybody else in the car business does. And as you say, I mean, it's never worked. They've always had problems with manufacturing, whether that's quality or efficiency, which in turn, affects profitability. And then, quality affects service downstream. And like all these problems that Tesla has flow out of manufacturing. And it's because they've just never accepted that, hey, companies have been doing this for 100 years. There's been a lot of competition for 100 years. A lot of companies have gone out of business, and the ones who are left know what the hell they're doing. That it's like that has not sunk in.
It's I think a lot of things get attributed to the whole Silicon Valley nature of Tesla.
Yeah.
And I don't know. You may have a better insight on that. I don't know that I would just say Silicon Valley, but I mean, they do seem like they work extra hard to reinvent the wheel at every juncture. And thus far, there's no question that Tesla's been hugely successful numerically as far as building electric vehicles and getting them out into the public's hands.
Yep.
Nobody else can touch that.
Yep.
But making money at it, being good at it, Wow. I mean, that seems like where it all kind of falls down. Now, we could argue that, we both know people that own Teslas and love them and would say that their quality is amazing. But we also know there's 25 stories for every one of those that,
Yeah.
where it's not the case. Anyway, I'm rambling here.
Well, no, so I think that's actually a really good important point to bring up, that about quality. People, when you say, when you write a book or you write an article that talks about Tesla's quality challenges and manufacturing challenges, you always get people who are like, yeah, but I've had my car for 5 years and I've never needed any kind of service, which isn't always really the case when you get down into it. But even assuming it is, right? Quality is all about consistency. And if you have, it's all about getting, and the standard in the auto industry is extremely high, and that's a product just of the last 20 years of competitive pressure. um and so for an automaker to have a defect rate at the end of the assembly line of 5%, that would be enough. That would be enough for them to shut down the factory and just stop building cars until they figure out why their defect rate is so high. 5%. And now we've seen reports of Tesla with first pass quality of 25%, right? And like, this is just unthinkable in the car business. And it doesn't mean they aren't able to fix them. But the important thing is that, like, saying, like, the fact that there are people that have had good experiences with no quality problems with Teslas doesn't mean there's not a quality problem. It's about the consistency, and the more you ramp up the volume, the more, the more that the percentage, even if the percentage stays the same, the volume then of problem cars goes up. More people having bad experiences, more pressure on your service, et cetera, et cetera.
No, yes, thank you for bringing that up. In the intro, you mentioned Michael Granoff, who, interestingly enough, was an early What Drives Us guest. We talked to him
Oh, really?
when he was funding Better Place.
Oh, yeah.
And you said you were a big fan of Better Place, and I was like, oh, look at that. There's like a
Yeah.
little crossover there. So cheers, Michael Granoff
Yeah.
and Maniv, and I guess he's pushing Revell right now, which I think is totally cool, electric moped company. But
Yep.
excuse me for that digression. There's a quote, page 18. By the first quarter of 2019, demand for all but the cheapest versions, you're talking about the Model 3, had been exhausted in North America, which is Tesla's largest market, and deliveries were down by more than 30% from the previous quarter.
Yeah.
But if we listen to the Tesla earnings call, where's the disconnect there, Mr. Niedermeyer?
Yeah, I mean, the demand issue is it's one that Tesla has really been trying to spin hard, right? It's they, and they need to. They have sold a growth narrative, and they have to show that they're growing, right? The growth narrative is what gets them out of having to show profits. And so, well, okay, if you're not gonna have profits, then you have to show growth. And yeah, so I mean, again, that's a specific thing. I'm not saying that, demand for Teslas has just dried up. I'm saying, the high end stuff, right? Basically, the 2 quarters where they were profitable in the second half of 2018, they sold high volume, so they'd fixed their sort of production hell. They gotten out of production hell. They were producing large volumes, and they were selling through their order book of higher end models, a lot of performances, a lot of long range, all wheel, dual drive, whatever. And what's happened is that they've had to, and we've seen the selling price has been going down on the Model 3, and then of course as the brand as a whole. I don't know what to say. I know why Tesla doesn't acknowledge it, and there's a culture has been built up inside and around this company where they don't have to acknowledge reality because other people will join them in denying reality. I don't think that's healthy for the company. I don't think that's a good thing for the company. It might sort of alleviate some short-term pressure, but in the long run, actually, I think that's one of the most dangerous aspects of Tesla is the fact that, the company is so focused on sort of image building, and that there are so many people around the company who will present reality the way they want it to be, and not just see things for what they are. And I don't think that seeing things for what they are is a negative or like bad thing. It is what it is, and you have to acknowledge things as they are in order to improve. So,
Right.
If you want Tesla to get better, I don't, and one of the frustrations for me is that I've been saying, for several years now, with the Model 3 coming, things have to change, right? And that was a lot of what I've been writing over the past few years has been, you can get away with certain kinds of manufacturing and service and quality issues or shortcomings, and even sort of a broader cultural approach works in small volumes of premium cars. But when you get into the mass market, the market is different, the consumers are different, the expectations are different, the volume, the scale of the challenge is different, right? You're dealing with much higher volumes, and so the same screw up when you're building 100,000 units a year versus 500,000 units a year, the same problem creates totally disproportionate impacts. And so you have to be better at everything when you're at higher volume and lower price points. And what's happened is that this group, I think of them like the chorus, the Greek chorus in a tragedy or something. They've got this
like
chorus that reflects, they reflect what they want to believe to Tesla, and by doing so, I think they've helped sort of prop up the stock price, which for a lot of them, that's the motivation. The stock price is tied to perception, and they think that if you keep the perception propped up and then the stock price stays up, then everything's going to be fine. But what's happened is that real problems have developed, and they haven't been addressed because the fans didn't force them to address the problems. And if the fans don't do it, and then people like me are like, hey, this is a problem, they can just be like, oh, you're a hater, you're shorting the stock, whatever, don't listen to him, he's just biased. And again, it's frustrating to me because now, right, like these problems are getting worse, right? The service situation is getting worse, the quality is bad, and these are starting to have a real impact on consumers. And it's like, if you listen to the critical stuff 2-3 years ago, like maybe it didn't have to be this way.
Right. And that's, if anything, the takeaway from the book is it didn't have to be this way.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And this is, again, this was my impression. I don't know if this is what you intended, but it's a lot of it flows right from the top, flows directly and personally from Elon Musk, who is hell bent on doing things his way. And his, basic principles, and that whole, first principles, which is the most misused phrase in Elon Musk lexicon. So a related question: is Tesla's real product, has nothing to do with cars, has nothing to do with solar? Is Tesla's real product the stock?
I think so. Yeah. And it's funny because this is also a Silicon Valley cliche. I have a quote from the TV show Silicon Valley, which if you haven't watched is hilarious, especially if you spend a lot of time around Silicon Valley types. And yeah, there's this whole thing about, Pied Piper, which is this fictional company, their real product is the stock. And I think that's the case for a lot of Silicon Valley companies. And especially right now, you look at, Uber has a real product, but their business doesn't work either. And yet, so, and if you look at their CEO incentives, it's to push the stock up. And if you look at Elon as well, that was the craziest thing to me, is that when they just redid his executive compensation package, it was a year and a half ago. It's like, here you have, this guy is already the number one owner of Tesla stock, right, by a large margin. He's already made a lot of decisions to protect that position and not dilute it. And yet, you incentivize him. None of the incentives are tied to actual profitability. It's all about margin and market cap. And so it's like he's already incentivized to raise the market cap. And already a lot of Tesla's problems come from the fact that they've incentivized, or that that he's incentivized to move the stock more than he is to fix fundamental problems with the business. And you basically were like, they just doubled down on that strategy of like, yeah, Elon, push up the stock price. That's what they said. They communicated to Elon that the most important thing to the board and therefore to the shareholders was the stock price. And I think if you look at the history of Tesla, that's where a lot of their problems come from is prioritizing the stock price more than the fundamentals of the business.
It's I have this theory in my head, and I don't know that it's not based on necessarily anything in the book or my experience there or watching it, but just sort of an aggregate of everything. But that Elon genuinely hates manufacturing. He has no interest in manufacturing at all. The idea of making 100,000 widgets of any kind is boring and tedious to him. He likes being the showman. He likes being the innovator. He likes being the face.
Yeah.
And after that, the rest of it is just stuff that gets in the way of him doing what he wants to do.
Yeah.
And I don't blame him, because that's a good gig if you can get it.
Yeah, absolutely. No, and the thing is that the way he has approached the car business, it's not that it's fundamentally bad or doesn't work. It actually does work quite well if you're a small volume premium automaker.
Right.
And if you look at the car companies that are out there, the ones that push the boundaries of technology, performance, of design, those are not the companies that are out selling 10 million cars a year. They're the ones that are selling, or maybe they're a division within a big car company, right? But you have to be focused. And the more you get into the mass market, your margins are smaller, your volumes are bigger. It becomes much more of a management challenge and really managing the manufacturing and the supply chain, which is not sexy work at all. It's sitting down with engineers and accountants and driving cost out of systems. That's not fun or sexy. And I think, frankly, it's not what Elon or Silicon Valley startup culture generally are best adapted to. They are, and that's like a big theme of the book, right? It's like, what are software startup style companies good at? And it's like, hire a bunch of really smart, really creative people, like feed them a bunch of Red Bull and make them work long nights until they come up with creative solutions to interesting, challenging problems, right? And a lot of engineers who've worked for Tesla, including sources of mine, have said it was like the greatest job they ever worked because it was so interesting and challenging and creative and freewheeling, definitely in comparison to an established car company. And again, if you're going to make small volumes of just really exciting, expensive cars, then that's the way to do that. The tragedy is that Elon's ego sort of, I think, forced him to have this plan to make ever cheaper and affordable cars that could be sold to the masses. And the tragic part of this is that they've had a major impact on the car industry without selling cheap cars. And I think that
huge.
Yeah, and so I think that they didn't need to do it. They could be consolidating a profitable high margin business, doing special editions and performance versions and raising their prices and maybe even limiting production so that it's more scarce, like Ferrari does. And that in turn drives up the prices and the profits. That would make a sustainable business, and it would continue to have a profound effect on perceptions of EVs, adoption of EVs, et cetera. And instead, they're going into a very, very, very different business, which is the mass market car business, and they're not well adapted to it.
It's living in Southern California, Teslas are not uncommon. Arguably, it's a very common. Well, no, arguably, it's a very common car to see here.
Yeah.
Which, in a sense, works against Tesla because of their price, because of what it is. That ubiquity is not cool.
Yeah.
Nobody thinks the Camry is cool, and the Camry is a great car. Yep. I love the Camry. I've driven a bunch of model years. It is rock solid reliable, and whatever you can say, oh, it's ugly, it's plain. As a vehicle, it is awesome.
Yeah.
But nobody thinks the Camry is cool because there's a gazillion of them out there.
Yes.
Model 3 sort of undermines all of the prestige that used to come with owning a Tesla.
Yeah. Yeah. So once I had dinner once in Japan with the chief engineer and his deputy of the Lexus LFA program. And I don't know if you ever been in a Lexus LFA or how much you know about it, but it is an absolute is what it cost $600,000 or something. That is what they sold for, and Toyota lost its shirt on them, which was the point of the exercise. They built a carbon fiber loom, the likes of which had never been seen before, and I think still haven't been replicated. The whole thing is just carbon fiber, and it's got this crazy V10 engine that revs so fast that a physical tachometer needle can't even keep up with the revs, and it has to be digital. Like, absolutely just amazingly engineered car. And what the chief engineer said when we were having dinner was, he was like, you know what? I actually miss working on Corollas, because a Corolla, engineering a really good, affordable, compact car is actually much, 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 much harder than one of these super high-end products where you know from the get-go you're going to lose money and it's all about building prestige, and you just don't have the same constraints. The challenge of engineering is having just those tough cost and volume and manufacturability constraints that force you to maybe compromise the design, but then your job is to make the design as appealing as possible within those constraints. And that's where the real challenge comes from. And the great engineers understand and embrace that challenge.
This goes back to the very beginning of the conversation, where it's easier to write a novel than it is a short story.
Yeah.
I mean, that there's a metaphor there maybe for the whole show.
Yep.
And again, this goes back to Tesla's mission statement originally, and their secret plan. They were going to build the sports car, then they were going to build an affordable car, then they were going to build a more affordable car.
Yeah.
Which again sort of undermines a lot of the reason why all of the early Tesla buyers, arguably even Model 3 owners, Model 3 owners don't want a Camry.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? They want a Tesla because it's got the T on the back.
Yep.
I don't, not all of them, like any car owner.
Right.
It's not a monolithic community. Everybody comes to it from their own reasons, but by and large, the majority of them would not buy an electric Camry.
Right. Yeah. No, I mean, and that's the power of Tesla, is that they have created a brand at a time when, established brands more and more are having to reach back to their past to sort of be we have all this heritage, and the car business is very stale in a lot of ways. And Tesla came in and created this new exciting brand that's unlike anything else. And for the first time, I think, and this is an underappreciated aspect of this, for the first time, people who made money in the tech sector could buy a car that actually really reflected who they are and the position that their business holds in our society. And in retrospect, you look at that and it's like, oh, it's so obvious, right? Why weren't people making premium cars for the tech millionaires? Why wasn't that happening? And Mark Tarpenning, who did the original sort of business plan for the Model S, with Martin Eberhard did the tech specs, for the Roadster at the very beginning, before Elon Musk got involved, he realized that walking around this neighborhood in Palo Alto, and by the way, the two of them had sold an e-reader company for quite a bit of money, and were quite comfortable and lived in the Palo Alto area or whatever. And when they were walking around, they would see a driveway with, a Porsche and a Mercedes S-Class and then a Toyota Prius, right? And what they realized was people are buying Toyota Priuses for the image, because
rich people.
Yes,
rich
exactly.
People.
Rich people. And frankly, I get accused of, saying too many nice things about Toyota, or only saying nice things about Toyota. I mean, Toyota really screwed that up. I mean, and the Prius is an amazing car, is a groundbreaking car, as a place in automotive history for sure. But the fact that they did not move aggressively to capture that premium market that all of a sudden they had, they just took that for granted. And that's kind of Toyota's downside, is that they are very conservative, and they kind of They kind of believe in just, well, we just want to make a good practical car, right?
And keep
And
making them.
keep making them, and then make it a little better next time.
Right.
And it's never like, oh wow, we just stumbled into this amazing premium market that anybody would give their front teeth for a piece of. Let's exploit it, and really develop that. They're kind of just like, well, no, we're just going to make the Prius a little bit better next time, and just kind of keep on doing what they were doing.
Yeah. No, I totally agree. In many ways, Toyota's huge mistake was not pushing the whole Prius line more hard than they did. Yeah, but I don't want to talk about Toyota more than we have to. But it's hard when you're talking about car companies and car manufacturing not to talk about them.
Yeah.
It really is.
Yep. And yeah, no, and again, I get grief for this a lot, but like, it's not that everything that Toyota does is good and everything that Tesla does is bad. It's just they're the opposite side of the same coin, right? They have polar opposite approaches to the car business, and with Toyota, it's not that I personally love everything about Toyota or its culture. Like, frankly, I would probably be a not great fit in Toyota's culture because of who I am and how I do things. But what you can say about Toyota is that just objectively, their trajectory from being basically a loom company, around the middle part of the century, in 50, 60 years or whatever, becoming what they are today, that is unparalleled. And you have to ask yourself, how did that happen? And it wasn't because they're the sexiest cars. It wasn't because they're the fastest cars. It wasn't because they're the highest tech cars. It was because they just serve that, at the end of the day, the mass market mostly buys cars as a utility, as an appliance, to get them to deliver utility.
Which isn't a bad thing. It's become an insult in the car writer world to say that it's an appliance car, as though everything needs to be a Ferrari, everything needs to be a Porsche. And it's like, okay, I guess, but I think the rest of us are just fine having a nice drive to work, going to the grocery store, listening to some music on a road trip. It doesn't have to be an amazing, heart-pounding, adrenaline-pumping experience. In fact, frankly, that gets really tiring after a while.
Well, especially if that excitement is, is my car going to break down and have to be, flatbedded out of here?
Right.
And that pragmatic sort of just knowing every time you get in that car, it's just going to work. That has really resonated with the mass market. And just Toyota proves that being conservative and being slow moving is actually the right adaptation for the car business. It's a positive, right? And everything is a product of its own evolutionary incentives, right? And Toyota's success has proven, this about the market and about the nature of the business, that you want to measure twice and cut once, that you want to take your time developing products, that you want to give up a little bit of performance or design or technology to have that level of reliability that people can really count on.
The Prius battery management system is a wonderful example of that. You don't ever maximize out a Prius hybrid battery because Toyota's built one of the best battery management systems going. It never taxes the system. The system lasts for a very long time. Honda and Nissan both got spanked with bad BMS systems in their early battery cars. But enough about that. Back to Tesla, because that's why we're here. This pattern, though, of innovating, which is a huge theme for Tesla, seems to have forced Tesla into some pitfalls, into some mistakes. And it's interesting that one side sees their innovation, even though they may not understand it. Or agree with it, but it's innovation. It's cool, and it could lead to something. I've heard this exact argument. It doesn't matter if it doesn't make sense. This could mean someday Tesla's going to be amazing.
Right.
Hasn't quite worked out that way yet. As far as manufacturing things, I'm not talking about electric cars or about their ideas. I'm talking about actually making a bunch of vehicles to sell to people.
Right. And I think it shows, again, what the Toyota lesson shows, which is that, success in the car business is not about being at the cutting edge of technology. that's, for if you're in a certain premium market, yes, okay, you want to be, the fastest around the Nürburgring, or the fastest 0 to 60, or have the latest connected technology in your car. For certain parts of the premium market, those things absolutely matter. But in general, having that user experience, it's the it just works thing, right? And people, it's funny because people, constantly sort of say, obviously Tesla gets compared to Apple a lot. And when you're talking about using a computer, which is what a smartphone is, that user interface, the software, that's what kind of determines, and the hardware, but mostly the software, determines that it just works experience.
Totally.
But with a car, it's like everyone knows the basic control schemes. It's not reinventing the wheel. It's using proven parts. It's using parts that are automotive grade and are not like, the screen going to be leaking adhesive out into the car, developing yellow rings around it, just because you want the biggest possible screen, right? It's compromise. And I actually have a chapter about the Model X, which is not the most important vehicle to Tesla, but it illustrates this principle, because Elon Musk, there's an Ashley Vance quote where he's held up as like sort of bringing the Steve Jobs style, to car development and design, where it's like he has this singular vision and he knows what it's going to be, and he just makes sure that there's no compromises. And people like that idea. And again, in the premium space, there's places where that appeals. But at the end of the day, compromises in cars exist for a reason, and that's what allows cars to just work. It's compromises. And it's that engineering challenge that we talked about.
Limitations. Absolutely. And yeah, and I see a little glimmer. I see part of that point. Like, if you're not trying to innovate, you're not going to innovate. You're not going to change. You're just going to do what everybody else is doing. Sort of. But you can use some of those methods to innovate and do other things. I guess for me, personally, it's more important for me to see more people in EVs than it is for me to see one brand of EVs just totally change the world because they're doing something and they're still selling $60,000 plus cars.
Yeah. That's actually been one of the most disheartening things about the Tesla phenomenon, is that being a Tesla fan has superseded being an EV fan. There was a time where people were an EV fan and Tesla was just sort of the standard bearer for that. But then it's sort of taken over. And now, the people who bash EVs the most are Tesla fans. Anything that's not a Tesla, if, the Jaguar I-Pace, and the Audi e-tron, oh, these cars are all such shit. They're so bad. Well, like they talk crazy amounts of shit about these EVs, and like, they're not terrible cars. It's more options in the EV space, which if you're an EV fan, that's a good thing. And how this got inverted, I think a lot of it has to do with the stock.
Yeah, I was just going to say, it's the stock is the product, it's the reputation. It's the image.
Perception. It's the perception. Tesla runs on perception.
It's, and I've said this on What Drives Us, but I mean, I follow a bunch of Facebook groups, the Nissan Leaf and the Chevy Bolt and all of this. And in a vast majority of the threads, somebody will say, blah, 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 I just got a Bolt and I love it, and I got 238 miles of range today. Yeah. And 5 or 6 posts down, yeah, but the Model 3 does 0 to 60 in 4 seconds. And I have, you know what I mean? And it's like, why would you do that? Why would you go into another affinity group and just take a big shit, basically?
Yeah. Well, and especially one of the really interesting things about it is that, EV fans used to complain about range anxiety and about how it was this sort of irrational thing, which I agree with. It is irrational. I mean, it's not completely irrational because we've been programmed by decades and billions of dollars of marketing to associate cars with the ability to, freedom, and you can just jump in and drive anywhere you want at the drop of a hat. And we're conditioned with that idea. So it's not fully irrational, but in reality, 95% of us, 98% of the time, we don't drive more than 100 miles a day. Like, it's very rare for most people to drive more than 100 or maybe 200 miles of range a day.
100, yeah.
Yeah, and if you're an EV fan, right, like, you want to see as many people have EVs as possible. Would you rather have one 400-mile range Tesla out there or two 200-mile range, whatever, Teslas or any other EVs. Like, given that we have limits on the battery supply chain, I think it's really important for EV fans and EV advocates to not just worship the most range as the be-all, end-all. I think it's really important to educate people about the reality that even people with a 100-mile range vehicle, like Mike Granoff, right? He had one of the BMW, the Mini E or whatever in the trial period. And he talks about it all the time about how he was sure he was just going to have all this range anxiety. And within a couple weeks, he's like, yeah, no, like I can do my entire daily routine. I leave the house every day with a full tank, so to speak. It just isn't an issue. And so I wish being an EV fan could kind of get back to that and stop being, whatever Tesla does, must be the only way to do it, because that's really not just short-sighted, but actually counterproductive, I think, to the broader cause.
Very. I'm going to get back to the book.
Yeah.
Not that we sort of deviated a little bit, but there's one thing in here that's always stuck in my craw. And I'll quote your book, with Musk extolling 80-hour work weeks. Is there any proof that he's worked 80-hour work weeks? Is there any evidence of it?
I don't know. I haven't seen his time cards, but
right. I'm sure, but
I'm sure he has worked 80-hour weeks. I don't know how. I mean, and the guy has a lot of jobs, right? He's got Tesla, which would probably keep anybody crazy busy, but then he's also got SpaceX. He's got Neuralink. He's got all these things. But yeah, I don't know. To me, that is part of the myth making, right?
Yeah, the whole sleeping on the factory floor. I'm going to sleep on the roof of the factory in Sparks, and it's like, why? You're the CEO. You've got a Gulfstream jet. What? I don't like. If you had, one of my early managers was telling me that if I have to be out sweeping the parking lot before the store opens, I'm screwed up as a manager.
Yes.
You know what I mean? Like I think that sort of speaks to the dysfunction within Tesla, which is very much, if Elon's not personally involved, chances are something's not being done right.
Yep.
And you hear this over and over.
Yep. And I think that goes back in the book. I trace it back to right after they came out of stealth mode. They got their first sort of round of media coverage, and the New York Times wrote 2 stories. And the first one didn't mention Elon at all. Right. And the second one was like, oh yeah, he's sort of the money guy. Didn't really, and both of them really focused on Martin Eberhart, who was the CEO at the time. And he was extremely unhappy about it. We know there's emails have come out where he's just absolutely livid. And within a week or two of that, of the second story coming out, he writes publishes the top secret master plan and positions himself as the guy, the genius at the center of Tesla. And ever since that point, Tesla has become, if only in terms of perception, more and more dependent on Elon Musk. And when you're talking about a company, right? If this is a small little startup, making small amounts of super high-end cars, you can have that. You have, for example, Pagani as a hypercar company, and Horacio Pagani is like the man, and he's the unfiltered vision, and he's creatively expressing himself with these cars. But when you're talking about a company with 30,000, 40,000 employees, you can't have that. And I think it's the decisions that get made so often are what's good for Elon, and particularly what's good for Elon's image. And that's not always the right thing for Tesla as a company. And Elon having to do heroic stuff looks good for him. It builds his legend up. But you're absolutely right. If he has to do heroics, there's something that's gone terribly wrong already.
Very much so. Very much so. And when I was there in my brief low-level exposure, it was constantly, you saw middle managers just wanting to be invisible, just wanting not to be noticed, just not wanting, because when that happened, heads rolled.
Yeah. And making cars is the ultimate team sport. I mean, that's why you don't have people like Elon Musk in the car business, is because to succeed at that, I mean, there are egos in the car business for sure.
Huge.
Huge out of control ones. But ultimately, everyone accepts that this is a team effort. it's not just one person doing anything. It's huge teams, and people have to work together. And the health of the system is always more important than any one person or their image.
Right. Absolutely. One of my favorite lines in the book, page 71, quote, "Somewhere along the way, Tesla had decided to be a startup forever."
Yeah.
Unquote. So true.
Yeah. I'm sure you from being inside, yeah, everyone says it.
And just, the whole, we're scrappy. Literally, one of the company tenets is be scrappy.
Yep. Yeah.
In a multi-billion-dollar company with 30 plus 40,000 employees, scrappy is an odd thing to be.
Yeah. And this is, I think this issue is what really is how I want to get away from. I don't want this book to be about like, is Tesla good or bad? And the problem with Tesla is that everything is either this makes Tesla look good or this makes Tesla look bad. And that's it. It's this very superficial way of looking at everything. And I think the real importance of the story and the real reason why it's important to acknowledge what Tesla has struggled with and failed at, as well as what it's done really well, is that the delineation between those things is the delineation between the future relationship between tech companies and car companies. And I think that's what's at stake here. That's why these lessons matter. It's because what they've shown is that, this is a test case of what happens when you take a startup style culture, high-tech culture into the car business. It does some things very well, and it does some things just absolutely abysmally. And, that proves that it's not going to be just tech companies getting into the car business and disrupting all the old slow-moving dinosaurs. Turns out the slow-moving dinosaurs were moving slow for good reasons. And so my hope is that we can get past this disruption narrative, which is so also very superficial and not very well considered, I think. And we can get past that and start to acknowledge the reality, which is that we're going to need both sides of this divide. We're going to need Detroit and Silicon Valley to build the vehicles of the future. But both sides need to get over their egos and learn to appreciate what the other side brings to the table and work together.
I think we're running out of time. So I have like 3 pages of questions that I haven't even gotten to. I know, right? But I'm going to skip to the last question, and we're going to do another episode with Edward, probably on What Drives Us, but who knows, maybe another time, just him and I. Look for him again. And if you hate this, watch the episode to hate it. If you love it and are learning things, watch the episode to love it and learn things. This isn't just about Tesla bashing. This is about looking critically at a company that is super important to a product category that I am deeply and passionately been involved in for almost 2 decades. So at least that's where I'm coming from. And I think that's where Ed's coming from too. I mean, as long as I've known him, at least, and maybe a little bit of no. So is Elon so connected to Tesla? Is Elon Musk and Tesla Motors, Tesla Inc., so intertwined that the two cannot possibly exist without the other? There's been lots of theories that I've heard that Elon's trying to commit suicide and get shoved out of the business because he's bored with it and he hates doing the boring stuff as much as he loves doing the exciting stuff. He'd rather play with SpaceX and Neuralink and maybe Boring Company. God knows that's a scam, but pardon me. I'm sorry, I opinionated there. Or I'm just curious what you think about that. I mean, obviously Tesla has some IP that is valuable. There's, without question, their electric motors are amazing. Their inverters, amazing. There are parts of the Tesla vehicles that nobody else has done yet that is way ahead of everybody else. I'm sorry. So Elon and Tesla, are they Siamese twins that will never be pulled apart? Or is it possible?
No, I think this is a really great question. And what I mean by that is that it's very difficult to answer. I I
I'm
do
sorry.
think no. I mean, it's like I say, it's a fascinating question, and I think it actually really gets to the heart of the future of the company. Like that's people always want to know, like, what is the future of the company, and I think it does depend. And I really tried not to make the book be about Elon Musk, because like there's Ashley Vance wrote a book that was really about Elon Musk. I really want to write a book about Tesla, but you're absolutely right, and I think that top secret master plan, from way back in 2006, that was the starting point of this intertwining. So this is not new. This is a 13-year-old sort of, increasingly, trend of them becoming increasingly hard to separate. And I think that that is one of the real big challenges about thinking about an exit strategy for Tesla, is because, he is the greatest asset and the greatest strength of the company, and he's also the greatest weakness of the company. And I don't know, right? Like I think if a car company could buy Tesla and Elon Musk could stay on as sort of the figurehead and maybe even have some, guide some of the design stuff, or, be engaged, but basically ultimately defer to other bosses, there would be a lot of interest in buying Tesla. But he's clearly not interested in being an employee of someone else.
Sure.
And then, what is Elon Musk without Tesla? I'm sorry, what is Tesla without Elon Musk? Without Tesla, Elon Musk has SpaceX and all these other things, right? But without Elon Musk, Tesla loses certainly, one of the things that makes its stock so valuable. A lot of people are betting on the jockey, right? Rather than the horse. And so I think they've painted themselves into a corner, or he's created a situation where, you kind of can't live with him, can't live without him. And so I don't have a great answer to that question, but I think that you've put your finger on like one of the key considerations for the future of Tesla.
Yeah, I mean, I'm asking you to predict the future potentially. Can you do that, Ed? Come on, just off the top of your head. And I get it, but it's if Akio Toyota, God forbid, boom, tomorrow,
Yeah.
Toyota goes on.
Oh yeah.
Toyota goes on, and if Jim Hackett,
Yep.
Ford goes on.
Yes. Yeah.
Okay,
That's the
nobody
sign of a strong
even
institution.
yeah, nobody even questions it.
Yeah.
Nobody even questions it. Elon Musk, everybody at Tesla, or a lot of Tesla people go,
Yep.
and I think Tesla's more than one person though. And
It
that's what I
is.
was sort of getting to just now with the motors and the amazing stuff that they have done.
Yeah.
Is not Elon.
Yeah. But I think, because he's been positioned so centrally, and because of also sort of the work ethic kind of culture that exists at Tesla, the crazy goals that he sets, and then the pressure to meet them, the burnout is really high and the turnover is really high. And so when you have that level of turnover, it's much harder to build an institution that can sustain itself. And so he is, kind of the glue that holds it together, if only because, so many people have left, because it's just such a hard place to work. And people, again, the fans like to present that as like a badge of heroism, right? Like, well, yeah, Elon's such a badass that nobody can keep up with him. Like, that's not a good thing.
Right.
Like
Exactly.
yeah, that's nice to sort of worship that idea, but like in the real world, that is not a good thing. That is not running a company well, and that's putting his image above what's best for the company, and that's just the heart of a lot of Tesla's problems.
I agree. Okay, Edward. Any final thoughts? Any final words? The mic is yours, my friend.
Yeah, no, I mean, I don't know. I love that people are finally reading this book. It's been a long time in the making, and I think it's very easy on Twitter, and even just with blog posts, to be sort of focused on certain things, and perceived certain ways, and not be able to sort of present a holistic view of how you really think about a company, and especially one as complex and as Tesla is. And so I really hope people, even if they think that I'm biased or terrible or trying to destroy Tesla or whatever, I hope they give the book a read, because I think they might be surprised. At least I hope so, because I haven't had a chance before to really lay out how I see this company through their entire history, and as many aspects of the company as I could. And so I think if there's any doubt about how I feel about Tesla, like, please read the book, because that will tell you. That will be it. And instead of telling me that I'm a hater, find out how I actually feel. Read the book. Like, even if you don't buy a copy, even if you have one person in your local Tesla club buy it and photocopy it, don't do that. But actually buy a bunch of books and then burn them. I've told people, if a whole Tesla club buys 100 copies of the book, I will come for the burning.
Will you bring like lighter fluid or something?
Yeah. Oh yeah, I'll help you burn it. Yeah. Yeah.
Oh God. Careful. I mean, bring a bodyguard with you just in case. So yeah, and again, I really love the book, not because you destroyed Tesla or destroyed Elon. I love the book because I learned a ton about manufacturing. I learned a ton about the car business that I didn't know. I learned a lot about Tesla, the company that makes cars. And that was the really cool part for me. Did I see some things in there that, I've always disliked this, and hey, look at that. Ed did this and this and this, and that was true. So I get it now. Yeah, there was definitely some of that validation for the things that disturb me about Tesla, but this is by no means 200 plus pages of Tesla hatred. And if you think it is, I think you're reading a different book.
Yeah.
If you're interested in Tesla, if you're interested in car manufacturing, if you're interested in EVs, this is a good book to get to learn about what obviously one of the most influential companies on the planet making electric vehicles is doing. Yep. Super, super important.
Thank you. Yeah, no, and the one thing I would just add is that we are on the brink of major change in the world of cars and how we get around. This change is only going to continue and accelerate. And I think that that's why people really need to not just understand Tesla, but really understand, warts and all, what's really going on, because it's about this future, and we need to understand this stuff now so that we can help shape that future. That to me is why this stuff is really important.
Super. I mean, you mentioned Uber and Lyft and the similarities and things like that. These are companies that are shaping our future, and we need to understand what's going on inside of them.
Yeah.
Do go to your local independent bookstore and ask them to order, if they don't have it in stock, Ludicrous, The Unvarnished Story of Tesla Motors by Edward Niedermeyer. And of course, if you have to, you can get it on Amazon. Am I allowed to say that? Okay.
Yeah. No, I love local bookstores. Definitely.
Local independent bookstore first. Absolutely. Yep. Go there, and if not, you can get it on Amazon. I'm sure they'll ship it to you in like 6 minutes, and it'll come by drone or something. Ed, thanks so much. We will see you again soon, I hope.
Absolutely.
Thank you so much for spending the afternoon. I'm sorry.
No, I was going to say I'm looking forward to hearing some of your colleagues and their thoughts on it, because I'm sure not everyone's going to have the same perspective. And you know what? I actually really enjoy hearing, as long as someone has actually read the book and then has an opinion about it, that's fine. Like, I actually do want to hear that, whether they liked it or not. What I don't like is the people who are like, don't read the book, even though they haven't read it.
Yeah. Like the people on Amazon who haven't read the book, but were there to like diss you for no, I mean, that's low. You know what I mean? Like, but again, that's like trolling the Nissan Leaf Facebook page.
Yeah.
Jesus, let people be. Anyway. So that'll wrap it up for this episode of What Drives Us One-on-One. Thank you, Edward Niedermeyer, so much for spending so much time today. And I will look very much forward to getting to my other 3 pages of questions maybe next time. Or maybe I'll just be quiet and, let it happen.
Yeah, no, I'm looking forward we'll definitely be back. It's always fun to chat, and I always enjoy talking Tesla with you. So thanks for having me.
Thank you, Ed. Thank you. And thank all of you for watching. Tune in next time to find out what drives us.